Well, here we are at the end of the 2016 AGM for the Channel Island Co-op Jersey Division. No great event tonight, no rebellion, no great political discussions.
I think it was a great event. We had very good profits and a nice smooth meeting, and obviously you couldn't film it because this goes out to non-members as well. But no, it was a good meeting.
Nothing secret arises. I mean, I ought to make that as a proposition for them, the members to discuss whether they mind, because historically it would be quite nice to have some of these in the archive, wouldn't it? Some of these meetings.
I suppose you're right, but it is an annual members meeting, and you know what people are like, sticklers for rules.
And it's important also because it is an ethical organisation. And it shows a business, I mean, of all times now, Panama Papers and all the rest of it, it does show an ethical side of business, doesn't it, which others could follow.
Well, it would actually show us in a very good light as
Absolutely.
well, I think. Well, it's something we'll have to have a look at.
Yeah, we have been saying that before.
I know I have, but I'll have to actually have a look at it this time.
It was gratifying to hear that the people who've been made unemployed, redundant, whatever had happened to them, the claim was that nobody had been left unemployed. They'd either retired, gone into retirement, or that they'd found other jobs.
Yes, and funnily enough, Nick Corbell actually shook my hand in the Royal Square to sort of congratulate the co-op on how well we'd handled everything, and how it was a complete opposite to how public sector were handling their redundancy packages.
I posted tonight, just because I happened to see it then, that the interviews we did 2 years ago when there was a bit of a demo outside about the town property, Pitt Street. All that's going ahead. The hotel's going to be built. The properties are going to be restored. All those things have been resolved as far as we know. They should be a happy end. There were no issues tonight like that, were there? There was no burning sores going on, unresolved issues. As far as
in fact, in the last couple of years, we've managed to resolve most of the issues. I think what we did is, with the National Trust buildings, is obviously we gifted them to the National Trust, but we took a pragmatic view and said, well, look, if we want to do something here, we're going to have to give up the buildings. And so we've taken a write down in the accounts. We gifted the buildings to the National Trust. And I sort of currently work around that end of town. It is going to revitalise that end of town.
I did ask the question about the warehouses. You said they're selling those, the ones that are no longer required. We also asked the question about Leo's Yard in Guernsey. Now, you explain that that's not going to be a co-op development. You're going to sell the development, presumably with approval, to a private developer. You said it's not an activity which the co-op will get in. Is there any reason why the co-op couldn't get involved in providing housing? Because obviously it's a desperate need in all the Channel Islands for housing.
We will be providing housing, but another developer would actually be building the houses.
Right.
What we did on Leo's Yard is the original plans, which was for retail space, about 25% of St. Peterport, were objected to by the Guernsey Chamber of Commerce and St. Peterport traders because they thought it would decimate St. Peterport. So we literally went back to a clean sheet of paper, realised that there was a social housing shortage in Guernsey, and then we're working with developers and with the planning department and with the Guernsey public to deliver something that the Guernsey public wants. And that actually means that we won't be putting a brand new co-op store on Leo's Yard. It will go more towards social housing. Will you have
much input on the price of the houses, or who gets them? Will you have input on that? Or once it's sold off to a developer or goes to a developer, is that the end of it as far as the co-op's concerned?
Well, we will have a say, in as much as when we're submitting the plans, there will be a bias towards the social housing aspect, which obviously guarantees a certain price limit, which will be acceptable.
You won't be giving a special discount to co-op members or anything?
No, unfortunately we won't, but we'll be using the money to maintain the dividend.
Because it is interesting, there's again, the medical side of things, and there's a big clinic going on now in Bath Street, I think you said.
Bath Street, where Blockbuster used to be.
Again, it's all satisfying social demands, which... I mean, obviously, these things overlap, don't they? Social provided by the government or social provided by private enterprise. And but there's a huge need for improved facilities, medical facilities, dental facilities, all those sorts of things, because they are incredibly expensive.
Well, to be honest with you, if we had been a PLC, we wouldn't have gone into the medical side, because we're not going to make any money out of it. But what we saw was an opportunity to provide much lower charges and free care for children to the sector. And to be honest with you, it's had quite an effect, because it's brought down prices at other practices because they've had to follow the co-op. And so it will be successful in as much as it will be a successful business that washes its face. But certainly we didn't do it from a point of view of making money out of it.
But if it's successful, I mean, you will make some money out of it, and it will provide a good service. Are other practices expressing an interest? Do other people want to join, other doctors want to join with you?
We have had expressions of interest, but with any new business, what you've got to do is bed it down first and make sure that it's running efficiently before you expand. If you expand a new business too quickly and you don't get the foundations right, then the whole house might fall down eventually.
I know everybody says trade secrets and it's confidential information, but what other areas could you possibly go into? Different areas.
Well, we've expanded the funeral care side by taking over a funeral care business in Guernsey to give us the economies of scale. There's no other real areas that we're looking to move into.
I went to a talk a few years ago. A guy was very keen on electric cars. Everybody says, what a wonderful idea for Jersey. Is that the sort of venture you could go into, providing electric cars?
We could probably team up with the JEC or someone like that to provide free power points at the Grand Marsh.
A bit contrary to selling petrol, I know, but even so, it's still a market, isn't it?
Well, believe it or not, when we're putting up these petrol stations, we do actually factor in the long-term usage for the site if the use of petrol should diminish. So we do have to look at that when we're buying these sites.
And things like ambulance services. Now, again, the local government here is looking at the cost of providing ambulances and whether people ought to be insured if they're going to be picked up. Again, there's no end to the potential things you can get into. After all, it's all business, isn't it?
It is business, and obviously I think people would be quite keen for us to get into dental care, for example, because dental prices in Jersey in particular are quite high, and it's something that we will look at as a board, but we need to bed down the medical care.
Because you're a Channel Island organisation, do conflicts arise between what you can do here and what you can do in Guernsey? Because there are differences.
There are differences. For example, we haven't opened a medical side in Guernsey yet because of the way the medical practices are arranged over there. We would like to. You can have loan accounts in Jersey, but you can't have loan accounts in Guernsey. So there are subtle differences, and obviously in Jersey we got 5% GST, and in Guernsey they don't.
I noticed what was being said about travel agencies, how people, I'm completely useless on a computer, I cannot book my own flights. If we want the flights and accommodation, it becomes horrendously complicated, and if you want several flights and several lots of accommodation, and you were saying a return to travel agents, is that something that has got further scope for development, or is it just a phase?
No, I think it has, because even the internet is developing. I mean, if you use sites like booking.com or so on and so forth, quite often if you book direct with the hotel, you'll get the same price, but you'll get bonus sort of loyalty points or something extra thrown in. So it's quite a complex industry. It's not quite as straightforward as going to one of these booking sites and booking and thinking you've got the best deal, because they'll all tell you you've got the best deal and then you find a better deal somewhere else.
One of the candidates for non-executive director tonight was proposing to return to the 5% dividend. Obviously, it's not going to happen. But maintaining the 4%, I remember a couple of AGMs ago, even that was vulnerable at 4%. Is it still vulnerable?
You have to run a very good business to pay a 4% dividend. And it's only by keeping ahead of the game, by changing demands, opening more convenience shops. For example, we closed the final salary pension scheme many years ago. This is one of the things that's pulling down BHS. You've got to keep changing, and it's tough to maintain the 4% dividend, but single pricing policy and 4% dividend, that's the blood of the co-op.
You've now got a real live politician back on the Guernsey side of the board. Peter Roffey has been re-elected.
Yes.
There's not one here yet. I've asked you before. We're getting closer to the next election here. Are you any nearer to becoming a candidate?
Not the next election, no. But I think politics is in my blood. I'd like to stand again someday.
Does it have any implications as far as the co-op to have live politicians? Traditionally it was the case. There were live politicians on the board. But does it make any difference now? Because obviously it's getting much tighter about conflicts of interest and all those sorts of things.
I think it all depends on where your conflicts of interest are. For example, when I was on the board, I was health minister, but we didn't own the medical practices then. So if I was in politics now and I was health minister and we own the medical practices and the pharmacies, there's probably quite a big conflict of interest there. So it would depend what position you have in government and what areas the co-op are in at that time.
Okay, I have nothing else I want to ask you.
Thank you very much, and nice to see you.
And you.
Okay, cheers.